Hello students. So we have reached in the sixth lecture of research methodology, and in this unit of research methodology, we'll be learning about data collection errors primarily. Now, data undoubtedly is a very important aspect of research. Now, the collection of accurate data is primal for an accurate and effective manner in which the research is conducted. Now, there are various learning objectives which will be met in this part of the data collection process. So this lecture would basically enable the researchers to understand the use of fieldwork procedure mode of data collection. So what exactly is the fieldwork process? How do you conduct the fieldwork process? What are the errors which are usually seen during the fieldwork process? How do you do away with those errors, and so on. This lecture will familiarize you with the different techniques which are used during the fieldwork process, and moreover, it will also assist the researchers in the data collection error process, which in turn will help them to minimize the errors which occurs during the data collection process. So basically, in this lecture, we'll be dealing about the fieldwork procedures. How do you actually go on field and conduct your research study? How do you collect the necessary data? What are the ways and means by which the errors occurs in the data, and how would you deal with those errors? So in today's outline, apart from the fieldwork procedure, we will be learning about how personal interviews plays an integral role in a fieldwork procedure, how telephonic interviews work in cases of fieldwork research, what are the common sources of error in any fieldwork research? What are the terms which we commonly used during a fieldwork? What are the errors which occurs in selecting the respondents, and what are the repercussions of selecting a wrong respondent? What is a non-response error? The measurement of non-response errors. How will you treat non-response errors? Then we have errors in stimulating responses and also errors in recording and interpreting the answers. So overall, in this unit, we will be learning about the various data collection errors which occurs, but to do so, primarily we'll be focusing on the fieldwork technique, and while doing so, we'll be drawing on the modes of data collection like observation, questionnaire method, the telephonic method, and their pros and cons to gauge the difficulties which arises in the total research as a result of an error which might occur during the process of fieldwork. Now, what is a fieldwork procedure? The fieldwork is an investigation carried out in the field or on site and not in a laboratory setup. So when we talk about fieldwork, it itself implies that it has an ethnographic nature in it. Now, what is an ethnographic nature? That is the kind of research design where the researcher will go into the field of study or on site to carry on with the research process. So as we know, ethnographically, the research is carried out into three perspectives. That is, firstly, the field research, or where you go and you collect the data by staying on the site where the research is actually conducted and where from you collect the materials in the form of photograph, and you transmit it with the help of digital sources, or you transmit it via other recorded means. So, an investigation which is carried out in the field or in the site itself is called a fieldwork process. Now, uh, for example, a typical fieldwork would be to find out the linguistic um, nature in a particular district. So, if we were to find out how many English speaking people are there in the district of say Raigad and how many Marathi speaking people are there in the district of Raigad, or if there are people who speak any other miscellaneous languages, we would do a linguistic fieldwork survey. So, in order to do so, it is carried out by an internal field staff or a fieldwork agency. Now, in any research organizations, the person who are closely connected with the research would all encompass of the internal field staff. Now, internal field staffs may comprise the literature, the researchers with their own strengths and weaknesses by which they feel that they are braced up to carry a linguistic study. Now, for that, in this particular example, we will have people who are trained in the languages like Marathi, who are trained in English, who are trained in Hindi, and so on. Now, if it so happens that you have top grade researchers who are not acquainted with the Marathi language or the Hindi language or any other languages which you might deem suitable to be used in that culture, you give it to a fieldwork agency. Now, if an organization decides to employ internal staff for fieldwork, a specific plan regarding their selection, training, supervision, and evaluation should be developed and implemented. Now, I cannot just send random persons to conduct an interview of that manner. So, for that, what will I do? I will first select the staff who I deem fit enough to go and conduct the linguistic study. Now, for that, I need people who are well versed both in written and spoken Marathi, English, Hindi. These are the basic languages I would need the fieldwork persons to know when they go to conduct a linguistic survey in a place like Raigad. Now, to see whether my staff is capable of the same, what will I make them do? I will make them to undergo a linguistic test. Now, in my linguistic test, what will I be doing? I will be asking the staff to see whether they have the basic knowledge in the local dialect, whether they are able to make out the differences in tone, whether they are able to explain the shortcomings of the language, the purpose of the study, whether they are able to get along, to assimilate, to adapt to the society at large, and whether they are able to blend in the culture of Raigad and not create any situations of embarrassment or situations of resistance by the respondents. So, what is happening here is Groover's selection is being done. I cannot have a person who is enthusiastically very good in the research design but is not acquainted with the language. So, probably I might need that person, but the selection is done in such a way that probably I would have a translator with him who would translate the language for him. So the selection is there, the training is there. The training is such that either the fieldwork participant should be able to handle it all by himself, or if he is dependent on others, then it should be such that there is a proper collaboration between the two. Supervision is very necessary to find if the internal fieldwork members are capable to carry on with the needs of the research design or not. And post the test, evaluation should be made necessary. Now, evaluation is essential, the pre-testing is essential, so that when the actual research test is implemented, there will be no errors. Or you have to see, in situations where errors do occur, you have to see whether the researchers are trained enough to handle it or not. Now, in case I realize that my individuals are of no use, that is, no matter how much I train them, they are still not fluent with the Marathi languages. Even if they are fluent, they are not able to convey my intentions of research well, or if you find that there might be some biases or favoring and so on, then what happens? I'll completely drop the plan of sending my own internal staff. In such a situation, what do I do? In such a situation, I would take the help of an external fieldwork agency. Now, if the organization decides to outsource personnel, it can employ them in the field right away because they are very trained. So, what happens is, if the members of the outsourcing agency are hired, I can just give them my demands directly and I am sure they will be met, because the process of selecting, training, supervision and evaluation in the pre-testing level is already done and achieved to the optimum. So, if I were to garner an optimum result, I would directly opt for personnel who would be from a field agency. Now, what is happening is, with this process, we are understanding the human behaviors, their natural, social and environmental contexts. In any trained laboratory setup or any artificial laboratory setup, this is actually not possible, because when you bring them to a laboratory setup, the respondents might become self-conscious, or they might act as a guinea pig, being in the fact that they are genuinely waiting to be tested, and based on that they would give mechanical response, or they might suffer from the halo effect, where they would give everything positive even though the situation might not be the same and all. So a field work or going on site to conduct a research is very essential if we are to have an in-depth understanding of the social, economic and natural setting, because this in turn would help us in our policy making decisions. So, this is the reason why fieldwork procedure is carried out on site to know and to test how the on-site field or on-site specimens would actually react to the test which is given to them. Now, how is the fieldwork data collection process carrying out? The first process in any fieldwork is selecting field workers. That is, in selection of field workers, we should see various factors like, are they willing to go and travel to the site where the research experiment is supposed to be carried out? Are they capable physically, mentally, their behaviors, attitudes and opinions in check to the needs of the research program on field. Then you have training field workers. This aspect would see if the personals you are sending to the field are capable of carrying out the needs of the research design or not. If not so, then the training of the field workers forms an integral aspect. Now, by word training, it does not imply making them run in that ethnographic site and get something out of it. Training would require both soft skill training, the academic training, the intellectual aspect of training, the physical training and all, so that the field workers are prepped up to carry on with their duties. Now, supervising the field workers. It is very essential to have a supervisor. A supervisor is someone who would monitor the ongoing process of the field workers. So the supervisor would see whether the correct field workers are selected or not. If so, is there any incoming or outgoing shortages in the entire training process and so on. So supervising field workers is very important. What if you send them to the linguistic area and because of their inability to communicate with the members of the society, they will not be able to conduct the affairs properly. So what the supervisor will do? The supervisor will remove the incompetent field worker, and in lieu of that, either he will shift position till a arrangement is made, or he will see to it how the makeshift arrangement is carried out in a strong manner so that there is no hindrance in the fieldwork process. Validating the fieldwork is very important. That is, if you go to the fieldwork agency and if you are not carrying out the desired requirements of the research design, then the data which you will collect will not be of any use to the research design. So validation is very important on all aspects, be it validating the field workers, be it validating the credibility of their work, the reliability, the trust in everything which goes as a package for a good fieldwork research. So all of these would come under process of evaluation, where you make sure that whatever processes you have carried out has been carried properly, and in evaluating the field workers, there are many techniques on how to evaluate them and how to make sure that the data collected is accurate and effective so that the research process is carried out without any discrepancies. So basically, there are 5 steps: selecting field workers, training of the field workers, supervising the field workers, validating their field work, and evaluating the field workers. Now we come to the next slide, that is the terms which are generally used in a field work. The first term we use in a field work is the space. The space is the physical space or place in which the field work is conducted. So, in space, the physical area in which you are conducting your linguistic study is very important. So, just because I have told you to go and conduct a study of the linguistic variations in Raigad district doesn't necessarily imply that you would cover the entire Raigad district. What you would do is you would select pockets where you plan to carry on with your on-field site so that there are the variations which can be tested. There are the necessary cultural changes which can be monitored and so on. So the space is the physical space or place which is given. Space again implies that if you are giving a questionnaire to a respondent, the space here will have two meanings. That is, not only the pocket where you are doing your sampling, but the space here would imply the literal space you are giving. That is the time you are giving the person to conduct the answers which you want to be answered, and it would also imply the space or the gap you give for the respondents to correctly give their responses. Then actors are the people who are involved in the research process. Now activities are what? A set of related acts that people do. Now object, the physical things that are present are called the object of the research. Now act is the single action that a person might do. Event is a set of related activities that people carried out. For example, when you go to collect a ethnographic report on the linguistic variation, you might see that the linguistic variations not only come out beautifully in their language which they are speaking, but it also comes out in their attitude. It also comes out in their dressing style, the temperament of the people, and so on. Then you have the time or the sequencing that takes place to complete the research process. The goal is the objective that you are trying to accomplish via the fieldwork, and feelings are the emotions that is felt and expressed both by the researcher as well as the persons on whom the research is being conducted. So when you go to a field work, it is very important to select the space, give the space, and see that the space is well used. You have to be very comfortable with the actors because you do not know whether they are fooling you or whether they are genuinely providing responses. The activities that people do should be stringently monitored so that any difference in the variables will let you to know about the fluctuations in your set study. The objects would be the physical things that they represent. The acts are the single action that the people do. The events would relate to the activities that people carry on with and which you observe during your entire ethnographic process. Timing is the way from the start of your research program till the end in which you sequence the course of actions that takes place. Then the goal is very important, not only for the researcher, not only for the interviewer, but also for the respondee, because if you take too much time to conduct your interview, the respondent might get bored and he might call it a pass, or you might get very bored if you have to wait for a long time period to conduct your interview. Then feelings are very important. The feelings are always felt via their emotions, and they are also expressed vis-a-vis by their emotions. Now, what topics do you typically take for a fieldwork research design? The first topic which you would ideally take is a topic that defines simple quantification. Now, what is quantification? That which can be quantified, measured, weighed, and so on. So, simple topics of quantification would include say you are to conduct a field research of, say, computer education in the secondary schools of Maharashtra. Now what will you do? You will go with your set questionnaires and then you will find out how many students have taken computer science as their subject, how many children have not taken computer science as their subject, what is the reason for uh, this proportion, what do the children think when they take general knowledge as a subject and not computer science as a subject, or what merits or activities the students think they'll be able to achieve if they take computer science as a subject. So what is happening is you are doing a quantification in terms of the ratio of students between general knowledge is to computer science. You will see the preference of the students over the subjects. You will see if children taking general knowledge in the secondary level are better inclined intellectually than the students who are taking the technical aspect of computer education. And you'll also find out what ways in which the disparities can be measured and corrected. So these are simple topics that require quantification and it is done. For example, if you were to study how many children require daily bus services from traveling from their village school to home. So you'll see if there are 500 students and 450 students say that they do indeed require a bus to travel from their home to their school, or 50 of them who prefer walking for the good effects that walking has on their overall health, and then you come up with a conclusive solution which would satisfy both the parties. So then you quantify the reasons why getting a bus service is essential or not, and so on. So all of these requires fieldwork, because you might then notice why all this while the bus service was not started. For example, probably there's no easy accessibility of the roadways. There's a bridge which might not be able to take the bus load, or there might be no easy availability of petrol or diesel for the next 50 kilometers. So simple quantification is seen in fieldwork researchers. Then we have topics where attitudes and behaviors are best understood within their natural setting. So, the attitudes and behaviors of the Adivasi people and the general public in the Indian society at large. For example, this could call for a field research. So what you do, you go to the Adivasi zone. For example, you try to understand the disparity which exists in tea gardens between the Adivasi tea workers and the upper class or higher class British Raj, or the so-called Indian British chamchas, or the bootlickers as they call them, and how they continue to carry on with their racial discrimination which has occurred right from the British time. So for that, in order to understand, you go to a field and then you draw out the examples. For example, one of the popular field study where attitude and behaviors of Adivasi people were studied was that in the Bukhyal Estate tea garden. Now what happened is, they saw that the Adivasi people start their lives early at 4 o'clock in the morning. They start with the tea plucking procedures and they do it when the sun is high, and they end it by 1 o'clock. Now in between that time period, 11 o'clock is a tea break, and actually for the sahabs or the managers of the tea gardens, that is the time when they go to the fields. But for these people, it's the time when they need a break to have a morsel of food. Now food is so scarce, so what they do, the remnant of the tea dust is concocted and then mixed with salt and given to the Adivasi people. So the disparities which exist while the members of the British Raj or the managers, they consume the best of the orthodox tea while the dust is given to the Adivasi people, and the securities and the killings and the uses of Adivasi people to meet the vested interest of the managers, the gory life of the managers' wives, the foppish lifestyle they lead, and so on and forth are seen in such settings. So, all of this is accomplished in a field study where the researcher goes, stays, and the group of researchers, one group with mingle with the high class managers and the other people who are in the tea gardens, and the other set of people would mingle with the Adivasis, understand the tribal people, understand the Adivasis who are the men and women of the soil, the children of the earth, and how they are deprived of even the basic amenities of food, basic amenities of good staying, private quarters, and so on. So their attitude and behavior which goes to make the inner workings of a tea garden society could be considered for a fieldwork research. Then the social processes that takes place over time. Polling is a problem which is seen in many parts of rural India where Gundagardi is highly practiced. Now the Gundagardi is seen mostly in places of Uttar Pradesh, mostly in places where there is a understanding between the locals and the higher class officers that if they vote for a particular party, they get the benefits. And if they do not vote, they do not get the benefits, and it might imply that they might be necessarily killed. So social processes that takes place over time. For example, if you have uh, allotted an electoral officer to conduct a polling inside a rural village, probably due to the semi-availabilities of the facilities, you might have people who are willing to go and let the study be conducted in those places. But there are also people who might fear for their life and they would blatantly refuse to go and conduct the elections. So the problem where the people who conduct the elections fear for their life and they opt out for duties in those places, or why in spite of people not voting you find a considerable amount of vote from that area, and which results in the election of a wrong leader. The basically demerits which goes on in the democracy are studied constantly through these social researchers. Then the study of meanings, the study of practices. The study of meanings implies what a particular custom would mean in a particular society. For example, uh, genital mutilation is practiced for men in certain Islamic societies, but we also have certain societies which practice it in children as young as 8 to 9 years. So what do these practices mean? The practices of matriarchal society where men after marriage will go and stay in the wife's family. Then the episodes, the encounters, the police encounters. You've seen many biopics being made on people who were bandits, how they surrendered later on. So encounters, the roles, the relationships, the various groups, the organizations like WHO and all conduct field research to know about the dispersion of the medicines and how it is being used in those places, and also settlements, why Adivasi settlements are considered to be a different society compared to the mainstream societies, their relationships. All of these would be the topics which are usually taken up in any fieldwork design which requires the ethnographic practices. Now, when you go on field, there must be a reason why you have gone on field. When we have studied in the earlier lectures about the different modes of conducting research, primarily interviews, there was this method where you would send your questionnaire to people and you would expect them to answer it and mail it back to you. In situations where it is not possible, the personal interviews are very essential. So basically, in ethnographic studies, you go to places and then on site you carry out your fieldwork by modes of personal interviews, that is one-on-one interviews or interviews on certain selected focus groups or pockets in order to get a thorough understanding. So the rules are: try to be interactive and sensitive to the language and concepts used by the interviewee. So in any field work, when you go, the interviewee or the respondent plays a primal role. So if you are to have a one-on-one interview with tribal people, for example, the Zulu tribe. Now, you might not have any clue on how the Zulu language functions, but you need to be sensitive. You need to be sensitive to the fact that even now they make use of certain sounds like and all. So you just can't laugh off if a person is trying to communicate through those means. So language sensitivity is one of the primal reasons of training and employment of fieldwork staff, where they ought to know the language of the people, they ought to respect the different dialects through which these people speak and so on. So basically it implies your need to be sensitive in order to deliver the desired goal. Now try to keep the agenda flexible. For example, if you were to analyze the relationship between the Adivasi women and the exploitation which they face in the hands of the elite members of the tea gardens, you will directly not go and scandalize both the parties and ask the elite group whether they molest women, or you will not go and ask the unfortunate women that are they being exploited or harassed by the elite views of the tea garden. So you should keep your agenda flexible. That is, if you are to conduct a field study on the exploitation which occurs in women in tea gardens, you will first try to gain their confidence. You will not drop your agenda right then on there. You will try to adapt and assimilate in their culture first, and then you will carry out with the research process. So aim to go below the surface of the topic being discussed. So before going and directly digging on concepts of exploitation, you need to know, understand the general lifestyle of the Adivasi people who work in the tea gardens. You need to understand the general lifestyle of the elite class in the tea gardens. Are the women themselves sufficient in elite classes where they tend to the needs of the husbands, or they themselves are exploited too in their own level, or do Adivasi women are helpless in situations where they do not usually have a male support, or are they exploited only by the elite class people or equally by the Adivasi men in the tea garden? So understatement is the key. You have to go below the topic and bring forth the impurities of your topic or the problem statements on top. Now explore what people say in detail. This is very important. People might become emotional and give you statements. They might be overstimulated by the questions posed by you, and then they might give you details which are not necessary. So the thing is, you need to understand in detail why a person is giving you a particular feedback and the reason behind that feedback. Now check whether you have understood the respondent's meaning. For example, many of the respondent statements might have a double meaning, let alone double meaning. Sometimes, due to language barriers, it might not be technically possible for you to understand the in workings of what the respondent is actually trying to say. So you need to make yourself clear on what you intend to study, what is the hidden meaning that the respondent is trying to convey, and so on. Then you try to discover the interviewee's own framework of meaning. There was this ethnographic fieldwork research conducted on this group of Jarawa tribes of the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. Now what happened was, the Jarawas are said to be ferocious by nature, they are barbaric by nature, yet when you examine them thoroughly, you will see that these Jarawa people are more human when it comes to being with their dear and near ones. So when WHO was conducting this research, they found many Jarawa people being sick given the tropical climate in which they stayed in. So they found that most of them were dehydrated and most of the Jarawa women were in dire need of intravenous fluid. So in order to get them an IV line, they were required to isolate the patient and administer the IV line. Now, what happened was, the doctors were amazed to see that if you insert the IV line in one Jarawa patient, the entire clan who has accompanied the particular patient wants to be injected with the same IV line. Now what is this reason for? The reason is, this Jarawa people thought about their so-called patient, which was considered by the health officials as one of them. So if that person has come to the state where an IV line is administered, then the entire clan will go through it together, or they will either not let them administer the IV at all. So what these people used to do, apart from giving medicines, the people who were in need of the medicines got it via the single IV line, and who were not required were administered normal glucose, dextrin and fructose, so that they didn't feel isolated, alienated, or they didn't have the guilt of endangering the life of their near ones. So what happened in this situation? The interviewee had to find out what that signified, the framework in which the mindset of the Jarawa people work. So in any field interview which you go, it is very essential to know the inner meanings which the respondent tries to draw out, and then you have to flexibly change your research plan and design accordingly. So the Imposition of one's structures and assumptions cannot be used. So you have to avoid it. So if you blatantly refuse to administer the ID line to the rest of the Jarawa people, probably that research plan wouldn't have been carried out and we wouldn't have known about who the Jarawa people really were. So if you have to get hold of certain data material, you need to manipulate it in such a manner that without hindering the process, you get the respondents and then you carry on with your research process, getting better and newer insights. Now you need to the effects of characteristics such as class, race, sex, and social distance on the interview. A set of respondees should always make sure that the class, sex, age, the social factors, and everything will be taken into consideration. So, if the interviewee is repulsed by the interviewer, they save you with your data. You might not even get the data which you are looking for. So these processes have to be kept in mind while conducting the personal interviews for any fieldwork. Now, what are the advantages of fieldwork? The first advantage is once you have gained the trust of the person you are interviewing, you can get spontaneous responses. The response rate is also high. You will be getting an information at a greater depth. What happens is, for example, in the C to know of the tea garden, not only you will know about the meet up with the expectations of the interviewee, but you will also get information at a greater detail. Then the questions which were deemed applicable during the initial phase of the interview will be met with the interviewer in detail. The interviewer, in other words, will meet by the modes of resistance with his sheer skillfulness. So, as a result of which, the response is generally low, can be collected more effectively. Now that you are in control with the mood and the local aspects of the people, you know when and how to behave. Then you can gather more and more of the personal information. So basically, during this personal mode in a fieldwork, what happens is the interviewer can collect information, collect supplementary information about the respondent's personal characteristics and environments, which in turn would add to the value in interrupting the results. Now, what are the disadvantages of this method? It is very expensive and time consuming, no doubt, and it is not suitable if the respondent wants to be anonymous. For example, if a respondent does not wish to disclose about the maldoings in a polling setup, what will happen is you will not get a proper answer. You will get a very biased information. If you go and question the executive on why the election process is faulty in these votes, then they might be unapproachable and you might end up collecting inadequate. These take a lot of times, and when samples are more, then it is practically not possible. Moreover, supervise the work, and it adds a lot of burden to the supervisors because they have to do with the complex work of training and supervising the field staff. Now we come to the telephonic interview for field research. Now in field research, the telephonic interviews are usually centralized as it is easy and technically feasible to conduct the interviews from a single place. So, in a central setup, you cater to a population. So, from a central location, the staff is controlled, and from there, they carry on with the research process. Now, in computer-assisted telephonic interviews, the staff is monitored by the supervisor as they master computer skills and also listen to their conversations over. Example, if today you a delivery service. For example, you deliver groceries to pan outlets, groceries from pan outlets across the city to your people in the city. Now what is happening is, suppose there is a lab where the delivery person might not deliver the product, but the delivery personnel insists that the product has been dispatched. So you get a call from your customer. Suppose you are monitoring the customer service where you say that my I have product, but it shows that the product. So now information, what will you do? You will on hold and you connect with the delivery executive. Now, while you have hold, the computer assisted telephonic service will ask certain questions on whether the customer is satisfied with the service right now or previously, and so on and so forth. In the meantime, you make an arrangement. If the delivery executive is not able to deliver, what do? You allot a different executive. Then you send a feedback to the person saying your delivery executive is on the way and you are deeply apologetic for the lapse that has taken place. Now in situations where the customer is a mean one, the customer has already received the product and the customer is doing so to get a refund. You do have customers like that who purposely create problems for the services, and this is one crucial method where you find out the error of the problem. So what you do, when the thing is dispatched, you take a digital signature and then you give a call immediately, a computer assisted call, where the person clicks the yes or no option via the modes of 1, 2, 3 and 4, and then it is certain that while the product got delivered, you receive a call where you click on the button which affirms your collection. So telephonic research is in this method. Now, as a result of error in this process, personal interviews, and your research is done in a good manner. For example, there is another aspect. If thousands of people have to be telephonically interviewed for their preferences of a particular object, and if the interviewer says that, okay, I have personally calls 1000 person, and then this is the report. Now, what will you do to see whether the person has done his job or not? You being the supervisor will call up random numbers. And if the person says that no, I haven't received any call from your customer executive, that customer executive is immediately removed from on-field research. So this process has its own pros and cons. Now the advantage of this method is it is faster results. It is inexpensive. So geographical coverage, irresistibility is there, reaching hard to people who are difficult to reach can be easily reached through these telephonic interviews. All you need is a proper connectivity and timing. Then timing can be anything. Timing can be early or timing can be late. Then there is better privacy and control, and the coincidental data is there. That is, an immediate feedback is received in this processes. Now, what are the disadvantages of this method? The basic disadvantages of this method is that there is no audit, right? So, if a person says that I have not received the product condition, you have no situation what the person is saying. If he is dissatisfied, meaning is dissatisfied in the market research. Then the interview might not be long. Then there is an inability to make judgment. You might not know whether the person is feigning it or the person is speaking the truth. Then answering machines and caller identification devices are also there, which adds on to your problem. Then you have sampling problem and obsolete directly and poor frame. That is, in this process, you need to know whether the sampling frame in which the method is conducted, you have to see whether it sends to the directory or whether it is old, and so on. Now, what are the common sources of errors in field research? There might be total error. So basically, in any field research, the method might be sampling error or a non-sampling error. Now, in non-sampling errors, what happens? Response errors, and the response errors will again be divided into the researcher's error, the interviewer's error, and the respondent's error. Now, the researcher's errors are carried out through surrogate information, the measurement of the error, the population definition of error, sampling frame error, and data frame analysis. The interviewer error process might occur through the respondent selection error, the questioning error, recording error, and cheating error. Then you also have the respondent error, where there is an inability on the part of the respondent to answer to your questions, or there is a deliberate to take part, and hence the error happens. So basically, the errors can be and the response error. Now, what are the basic types of error? The basic types of error are basically the respondent error and the non-respondent error. Now, what is the basic respondent error? Now, a category of sample bias resulting from some respondent action or inaction, such as the non-response or response bias. Now, biasness is nothing but your favoritism which you show. That is, you are inclined to one topic, right? You might be inclined to the interviewee, or you might be inclined to the respondents, and so on. So the respondent error usually occurs when the